All right, so here we are today. Thank you all for joining. Today we are very fortunate and privileged to have Carly from Folk on the Rocks joining us and Cam from Yellowknife Multisport Group joining us. So they've been both willing and very excited to share their volunteer knowledge with all of you. They're both very experienced in this area, have worked with a lot of volunteers over many years. And I'm super excited that they agreed to give us all lots of valuable information to take back to our own organizations and where we all volunteer or need volunteers. So Carly and Cam, thanks so much. Carly, take us away.
Okay. My name's Carly McMahon. I'm the Executive and Artistic Director at Folk on the Rocks here in Yellowknife. I've been doing large-scale events, nonprofit work, and startup work for well over 10 years. So lots of volunteer recruitment and working with volunteers, organizing people, those sorts of things. So I don't know, excited to talk about it. And yeah, our organization works with over 450 volunteers annually right now. So still working with lots of volunteers.
And I'm Cameron Twa. I'm the president-elect for the True North Rotary Club of Yellowknife. And in this capacity here, I'm the vice president of Yellowknife Multisport Club. We do a lot of smaller events as opposed to Folk on the Rocks, which is a very, very large event. We do a lot of smaller events. The Multisport Club is 100% volunteer run by our board, and members are people who take part in our events. We have a lot of long-term volunteers on our board, so I'm pretty used to what it is to be a long-term volunteer with longer-term volunteers. In 2019, we teamed up, Rotary and Multisport teamed up together to create the 5K Walk Run Challenge, which is a 6-event race, I guess, if you want to call it that. It's not really a race, but we teamed up together to create this event, and in doing that is where I've utilized the majority of the volunteers because I organize all of those events. But the Multisport Club does many other events like marathons, fundraising 5Ks, the Frostbite 50, duathlons, triathlons, and the Pedal Paddle Pound, and I'm kind of involved in all of them. I do an awful lot of volunteering, and hopefully I can share some of my knowledge today of volunteering.
Perfect, thanks Cam. So what we decided today, since Carly and Cam both come from a little bit different backgrounds with volunteers, is that we have some questions that I'll ask both of them. They'll provide answers, and then we also have some time left at the end for any of you that have more questions that maybe we didn't address during this session. So our first question to kick off is, what sources do you use for recruitment of volunteers, and what works best and what doesn't work? So we'll start with Cam.
Yeah. So for the Multisport Club, our biggest generalized recruitment of volunteers is through emails. We have a mailing list that people can sign up to, and we email people through that with Mailchimp. Oftentimes you'll see messages from us on Facebook looking for volunteers for events, but I don't think that's really where we get the majority of our volunteers for events. Where we get them is from previous events that we've done. You just getting in touch with people who had a good experience year to year in the same event. We have like the Overlander Marathon. There's people who just want to volunteer every year to do the same thing on those events. Another place we can get them is in our partnership with Rotary. We can ask Rotary, which is me too, if there's anybody who's interested in taking part in some events, particularly the fundraising events. But what I find, because our events are small, is I like to get involved in the community and be a volunteer in other events. And when I'm out in the community working with other groups and other people, I just sort of build a little personal network of friends, and oftentimes I can reach out to those people if I need to fill some spots in a pinch, or even when I'm just trying to build a volunteer base. I find it helpful to be part of an organization. You wouldn't want to, I would have a hard time collecting volunteers to do events if I was doing what my friends might say is the cam runs, where I'm just organizing an event for myself. But when you're involved with an organization with some level of popularity, like the Multisport Club, people come every year because they trust the Multisport puts on good events, and people will volunteer every year as well as take part in the events.
Awesome, thanks, Cam. Carly?
Yeah, so we use a lot of similar methods to what Cameron described. Of course, we have an email list with a couple thousand people on it at this point, past volunteers, ticket holders, other events and things like that that we've held. And we get a lot of return volunteers, which is fantastic. But I find the method that works best, especially when we're looking to recruit new volunteers, which we do usually need a couple hundred of those every year, is really the one-on-one interaction. So we do stuff like we'll set up, of course, at the trade show, and we'll have sign-up forms there, and we talk to people about what happens and try to make it look really fun. And we'll do stuff like we're out on the street, usually in front of the post office a few times in the months leading up to the event. So we'll have like popsicles and ice cream and stuff and games for people to play, and like really kind of trying to build the energy or like the tone of the festival, and sort of show that if you come and volunteer with us, like it is going to be a really good time. Like we need you, and well, there will be some work involved, but also it's a rewarding experience where it's a fun team and we have a good time while we're doing it. So I think those are really are probably our best recruitment sources. And usually people are, you know, if one person signs up, they also want to bring a friend, so they'll kind of bring their friend in to help them. So that sort of team sign up thing works really well. We also do corporate volunteer partnerships as well. So oftentimes banks, I know TD and CIBC, a few others, have part of their annual mandate that their staff have to put in a certain amount of volunteer hours, and they actually pay them for that time, but they, instead of being at the bank doing their regular job, they'll come and volunteer for organizations. So we've done a lot of those types of partnerships as well, which is really great because you can usually get like 20 or so people kind of right in the door. Yeah, so I guess in addition to email lists and sort of your traditional methods, we do a lot of radio posts and Facebook and social media as well. Those face-to-face interactions or partnering with corporate sponsors are really where we see the big numbers come through.
Great, thank you. Cam, can you go to the next?
And Carly, I also find often the one-on-one interactions that get the best volunteers, because you can communicate exactly what it is you want, and there's not that air of mystery about, well, what if I'm volunteering for this event, what does that mean? And people are kind of scared to volunteer sometimes, but in the end, it's really not a big job usually.
Some of ours are pretty fun. You get to drive quads and stuff around the site, which is like, yeah, it's a good time.
Love it. Fun things that people love to do.
Like right now. It's so fun.
Yeah, it's basically just us yelling that on the street corner for hours at a time.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, our next question is, what happens to your event if you don't get enough volunteers? So Carly, let's start with you this time.
I mean, pretty much we crash and burn. I mean, really, our event is built up through volunteers. So, I mean, like I said before, we're really lucky in that we have a lot of longtime volunteers, like people that actually started volunteering with their parents when they were children, and they keep coming back every year. So we do have like a really lovely core where I don't think this would happen, knock on wood. But if we didn't, I'm not really sure what we would do. I guess the following year we'd be looking at more paid contracts, but that would also mean that our event would be suffering in other areas, and we're already, of course, a nonprofit on a tight budget. No, we truly rely on the volunteers that come, and without them, we would be royally screwed. That's all I have. It's not a good answer, I guess. It's true.
Well, it's a hard question because you go through all of this planning to create these events, and in your event, it's a huge event. And for my events, it still takes a lot of effort to get an event put together, and then you either have to downsize it or you have to cancel it. I don't think it can be stressed the value enough that the value of a volunteer is so great. It's not just free labor because they're paid in a way, they're paid in an experience of being part of this event, but the whole community is benefiting from volunteers. So if we don't get enough volunteers, if we didn't get enough volunteers for the Overlander to do it safely, we would have to cancel it. That would be unfortunate.
Thanks, both of you, for those answers. And I think Cami also made a great point just about volunteers being so important, and sometimes that can make or break an event. So thanks.
One thing that we do at the end of every single event is we do a analysis of how many hours of volunteer time it took to put on an event. And as an organizer, I get to see those numbers, and it's huge. Just for one of my little 5K events, you could see 50 hours, and people are coming out for just an hour to run up and down the trail. And what people don't see is that 50 hours. But if you put equivalent on that of $15 an hour, that's a lot of money that you would have to pay people to do these events, to do them safely. I mean, you can downsize an event. You can find ways to eliminate the need for some volunteers, but it's still, to have the events the way you want them, those volunteers are very valuable.
Yeah. Thanks, Cam. Okay, so Cam, we'll start with you for this question. What qualities or skills do you look for in volunteers, especially ones in leadership roles?
I like this question a lot. Because there's the second part of this here where it says it's hard to not just take whoever shows interest, and that's so true, because there'll be a lot of people who say, oh, I want to volunteer, and it's really great. I love it when people want to volunteer and be a part of it, but sometimes people are just not a good fit for what it is you're trying to do. They don't have the qualities that you need for your event, and I'll tell you that the qualities that I look for people who are excited about the event, especially in leadership roles. I want people who share the same vision I have with what event I'm trying to put on. There's multi-tiers in some of these in the volunteering levels, and while I'm the organizer of the event, I need somebody to handle a certain aspect of it who just knows what I want. They're dependable and independent. That's a real big one for me, is that they're not going to continually come and ask me questions. As the organizer, let's say if I'm doing the Overlander event, I want to be able to stand there and just be ready for emergencies. And I want to have people handling the checking in, handing out the medals, all the different aspects of it. I don't need to be asked questions all the time unless there's a big emergency. And that's not to be rude, it's just I can't do everything. And so you're looking for those dependable, independent people. Another important thing is when you start getting into the details of the volunteers that you need. Maybe you need, I've done some events where we're running around the Frame Lake Trail, and I need people to run around after. So I need people who are good, experienced runners on the trail, who can go and sweep the trail and make sure nobody was hurt. They maybe have first aid. Maybe I'm looking for people with photographic skills, or in the Overlander, we're often looking for bike marshals who can keep up with some of the very, very elite runners in town who I can't even keep up with on my bike for 42 kilometers. So there's a lot of specific skills you're looking for, but I'll tell you the thing that I I personally, I don't really like unless they show some sort of level of enthusiasm is calm hour kids. It seems to be whenever you're talking about getting volunteers in town, they say, oh, there's all the kids in high school who are looking for calm hours. And it's great. I hope that they find some ones, but I don't want anybody who's just looking for hours. I want somebody who has a desire to be a part of my event, who's excited about it. And then if there's somebody who wants some calm hours, I'll find them just an easy job somewhere that I don't need somebody super dependable on. But that's probably the one that I get a little bit iffy on, people who are just trying to collect calm hours to get me to sign off on them.
Thanks, Cam. Carly, what about you for Folk on the Rock?
I mean, yeah, independence is a great word for sure. We're always looking for volunteers that are independent for these leadership roles, but we almost treat these roles like job interviews. Like we have interviews for these different leadership roles that we have across the team. I mean, they're short. We don't, it's not like an hour long or something. Usually we'll meet for coffee for half an hour and discuss all the roles of the job, how much time it's going to take, gauge if the person is really up for that kind of commitment, and talk about their skill sets as well. A lot like Cam, maybe, we're looking for someone to work in our finance cabin over the weekend, which is like counting a lot of money and dealing with a lot of cash. So we're looking for someone with experience, maybe in accounting, or at least working with numbers in some capacity, or a first aid person. So we do, I guess, really look for specialized skills, enthusiasm as well, because we're fairly customer facing on most of what the things our volunteers are doing. I also look for friendly faces, enthusiastic. I'm sorry, what was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, we do a lot of, I guess, sort of like volunteer hiring up from within the organization as well. So it's not typical for us to take someone right away and put them in a leadership role the first time we meet them. Usually those roles go to longtime volunteers who we've worked a few festivals with. We know who they are, what they do, what they're all about. And then we sort of put them in those leadership roles. So we do kind of have like a tier or a bit of a volunteer hierarchy to some extent. And we do check references for people too. Sorry, that's not so much about quality or skills, but maybe I think I'm looking for a lot of the same things as Cameron. So I thought maybe I'll talk more about how we get there. We do reference checks, and of course we do background checks on anyone that's working closely with children as well. So it is actually a bit of a process. Our volunteer manager spends a lot of time really getting to know people that we'll be putting in those key roles.
Thanks, Carly.
One other aspect that I find when I'm doing races and all that is oftentimes people will come to me. This is how the way I got involved with Multisport Club was I started running, and I had some ideas that I wanted, and I found out that Multisport Club does not organize events. Multisport facilitates events that people have organized. There's exceptions. The Overlander, we do organize that. That's one of our signature events. But the rest of the events generally are just ones that somebody had an idea they wanted to do, or they want to carry on because somebody else has decided they're done with it. So oftentimes I get people coming to me and saying, hey, the Multisport Club should do, this year was a Halloween run, and it was such a great idea. The Halloween run is a really great idea. And you're never going to have a successful event right away. We had like 30 people, 25 people sign up, which is pretty good for a multi-sport event, a virtual multi-sport event. So I was happy with it. But what I saw in that particular situation was somebody had a great idea. Somebody wanted to create this event. And so I took the time to show them how an event is created. And now it's a smaller event than Folk on the Rocks, but I took some time, showed them it's not as much effort to put together an event as one might think. Here's all the little things I do to get it going, and here's how it goes. So I often look for people who want to learn, and and take those roles. And I'm hoping that the people that I've helped this year will be volunteering to be race directors next year.
Awesome. Thanks, Carly and Cam. And I'll just put in here, I had asked Diane, who looks after Heydays and the NWT track and field, if she could come and speak, but unfortunately it's teacher-parent interviews this week in Hay River, so she's tied up. But she did email, and a couple of her comments about attracting and keeping volunteers kind of touches on the strength part, and she said really allowing your volunteers to work to their strengths. So finding what they are really good at and maybe allowing themselves to have a challenge, but giving them what they know that they can be confident in. And know that if you give them a different task, you may have to pick up some of the slack, she says. So being mindful of those things then. Awesome. Cam, do you want to flip to the next slide? And I think, Carly, you're up first. So do you use or recommend any software for organizing volunteers?
Yeah, I've worked with a couple different platforms. When I was working, I worked for a political campaign for a long time where we were heavily volunteer-based, and we used a system called Nation Builder, which is more for political campaigns, but we actually started using it at Folk when I first started here as well. We don't use it so much anymore. I think, though, it really depends on the number of volunteers that you have. Like, I know for our smaller events, I don't usually use any software. And our current volunteer manager, who's been with us for a couple of years, she actually just really likes Drive docs because they're quick to edit. She can share them with volunteers. Resources and materials are there right away. So we've actually switched off of software. Yeah, I've enjoyed that. And Marcato I've used as well, which was an okay program. I find it a little clunky more on the administrative end, but it is good for organizing people. But yeah, at the end of the day, we sort of moved off of software just because we found that we were actually more efficient on our own, and it costs less to do Google Drive docs. So if you're a spreadsheet freak like I am, and a lot of our staff are, our volunteer manager included, that's actually where we decided to go after trialing a few different softwares. But I think it's really up to you and the scale and sort of what your goals are for your volunteers as well, and what you need.
And that's kind of, for us, we're very small, so I don't have any need to use any big software, but definitely Google Docs and Gmail. We have an account, or we have a number of accounts for things like Google Docs and Mailchimp and Zone 4 that we all use, and we all have some form of access to. I'm talking about the board of Multisport. When it comes to, so now we can all work together on our different events. I can make my own events independent of other people, but I can still utilize their events as templates if I'm like digitally in Zone 4. The Gmail, in the Google Docs, we have a lot of historical documents like our old AGM minutes and our insurance paperwork we keep in there. It's a great platform that anybody who's on the board can access, and we can change the password whenever we need to. For events, I said earlier that we use for organizing volunteers. Well, we can use Mailchimp to get volunteers, which is a great program. And then I just communicate with email. Maybe if I know everybody, Messenger, and I organize with Excel. But there's no special software like Nation Builder. Just things that make the job easier is what I aim for. I'll say this: my events. When I started doing the 5K walk run challenge in 2019, I had 40 people sign up for the first event, which was great. And it was one of the most popular events of the year. But now I have 100 every single time. So I have to use a software system like Zone 4 for registration, because I just can't keep track of all of the registration information and the waivers that people have to sign. I can't keep track of it all. So finding platforms that will and databases that can be online, that can collect money for you and just deposit it in your bank account. It's very, very handy. It's kind of crossing into the registrations I'm getting into there, but it certainly works with, it makes volunteers' lives easier.
Yeah, actually, that's one thing that we learned last year, I guess more in regards to the software we were using for contacting volunteers. But our volunteer email address for a long time was just volunteer@folkontherocks.com, which is where our volunteer manager had been communicating with people. But what we found in terms of communication with volunteers was that because her email address said volunteer in the top, she used the word volunteer so many times in her actual emails to people. And because they were going out to such large numbers of people at a time, they were falling into spam folders quite quickly. So anyway, I just feel like this is a good tip in that if you are emailing a lot of people at once, we learned that it's best to have, we did some research and actually talked to our email host folks. Anyway, it's best to have a name as like the address header. So now it's Teresa@folkontherocks.com, and how to word emails better so that they don't fall into spam, which was, yeah, I mean, obviously quite critical in terms of getting large amounts of information out to a lot of people at once. So if you are doing this, that is a tip I would recommend, changing around your email address. You'll probably get better results in terms of communication to lots of folks.
And Mailchimp is a great software, and you can see exactly how many people have opened up your email. And it's very rare to get over 35% of people even opening the email, just on any email from Multisport Club. And it's here or there who's opening it up. I don't know who's opening it up, but it's such low opening of those emails. I think one time I got 42%, and I was pretty excited about that. So, but that's the reliability of using emails or Facebook posts. People just delete it or scroll through it, right? That's why the one-on-one sometimes software is to your disadvantage, because you're not reaching the people who actually are volunteers. They're just inundated with emails.
True.
Yeah. Thanks, Sam. Those are all great tips. I know even for myself, when I'm offering to volunteer for something, I will admit that I do kind of like when it's a quick, handy form and it's not that I have to call anyone. So I am a big fan of Google Forms, and being able to kind of fill stuff out that way. And then on the back end, it's really easy to like put it in an Excel spreadsheet or something very simply and organize your volunteer that way. But that's just my personal thing.
We're on the same page. We also use a lot of Google Forms for intake for volunteers as well.
Yeah. Awesome.
And technology can make it really confusing too, because you'll have all of these people who respond to your Facebook post, but you're putting up 5 or 10 Facebook posts asking for volunteers throughout the season. And they'll say, oh, I'm in if you ever need anybody. But how do you manage that? You have to, the only way to manage that is to use that software to collect the names and write it on a piece of paper and stick it on your wall for later and say, here's some people who said they'll volunteer. But it's very easy to forget, and it's really hard to manage sometimes. So maybe the Google Forms is a great idea. Same way as people sign up for a mailing list.
Yeah. Great. Well, I have one more question, and then we can open up the floor if people have other questions. So the last question that I have, which Cam, you can start with, is how do you retain volunteers? How do you keep them happy? And how do you work with them when they become unhappy? But sometimes happens.
This is my favorite question because this one is the most exciting one to answer. We're in a small town here, and pretty much anybody who is in this presentation or who will view this for NWT is in a small town too. And in small towns, we know people. We know lots of people. These people who are volunteering for our events, they're our friends. And for my events, which are small, a lot of the people who are volunteering are my friends. And I just aim to treat, how do I keep be treated. I aim to treat them good, and I'm thankful that they're there to help make this event a success. I let them know that that they are valued in what it is that's happening. I had, again, I'll go back to my 5K challenge. After 3 events, after you participate in 3 events, you get a medal. After people who volunteer in 3 of my events, they get exactly the same medal, because even though they didn't run 5K, they're there to make this event a success. So I'm very aware of what I need from them, and they're happy to be there, to be a part of this. The other thing I do is you have to provide quality opportunities for them to do. You don't want to just have, sometimes you do need a person standing by a stoplight telling people don't cross the road. That's a safety thing. And then other times that's kind of a boring job, but some people will like that. Some people actually don't mind sitting there in a chair saying, hey, don't run across the road on the red light. And it's frustrating because pretty much everybody does, but we have to have somebody who will sit there and say that. But then there's the other opportunities where you can be at the registration desk and you get to talk to people, or you get to hand out medals to people who've run their first half marathon, first 5K, whichever. They're very, very satisfying jobs there, that your volunteers will tell you the things that they want to do, and you should make every effort to give them the things that they want to do. Not everybody can hand out a medal, but if you look at all the different events or all the different opportunities to volunteer for, tell people what they are, they'll pick what they want to do, and then they'll take the ownership of that task. Typically, they'll take the ownership of that task. And one thing about ownership of a task is, from what I've learned, is don't micromanage them. Oh my goodness, that's definitely a way to make people unhappy. I've been told we have a really cool thing with the Overlander Marathon, where we have a table typically set up at Overlander Sports. And one time I was hanging out there when we had some volunteers to hand out the swag bags and check people into the race. And I got told by the people to leave. They can handle it themselves. They didn't need me hovering around, which was pretty funny. But it was upsetting them. They felt micromanaged by me standing there, even though I really just wanted to be there because it's such a fun thing to do. You wouldn't believe how fun it is to sit in the store and see people who are coming, who are excited about that race. Volunteers, they're not doing this for money, typically. They do get paid, but they get paid in a positive experience. And they really enjoy being a part of this event and making it this big event, this small event, but making an event a success. I think when it comes to dealing with people, you'll always have people who are unhappy and people who don't want to volunteer anymore. And I think the most important thing that a person who's organizing an event can do is acknowledge it. Acknowledge that they're unhappy, and talk to them about why they're unhappy. And don't put any pressure on them. If they don't want to be a part of it, if they're unhappy, let them go. It may have absolutely nothing to do with that event, but just let them go, and don't, again, at the end of the day, they're your friends, right? I notice sometimes people get a little bit of volunteer burnout. And again, you have to acknowledge that people are getting this volunteer burnout on boards. Some of these events are a lot of work to organize. And what I do when I see somebody's getting a bit of volunteer burnout is I look at what it is, I ask them what it is that they need help with, and I get in there and I help them, or find people to help them. Maybe they need more help, so I look for more volunteers for them, just to take some of the burden off of them. And they may quit. They may quit the next year, they may finish that event and quit, but sometimes they just need a year or two off and they'll come back. If they left in a positive way, you can be upset, you can be negative, you can leave on a positive note if it's handled right. And honestly, I believe it's just by acknowledging that, hey, thank you for everything you've done. I know this was really hard for you, and I appreciate everything you've done. these events couldn't exist without people like you. That's my long ramble.
Thanks. And Carly, what about you? How do you all retain volunteers, keep them happy, and deal with the unhappiness?
Yeah, I mean, we try to provide a lot of incentives, I guess. I guess I'm pretty pro bribing people. No, but we do have a lot of incentives. So of course, a festival pass, a day pass, or a weekend pass, depending on how many hours you put in before or after, or sorry, not after, during the festival. We have lots of swag that we give volunteers. We also you know, shirts and sweaters and things like toques and water bottles. We also partner a lot with organizations in town or businesses to have prizes or special treats specifically for volunteers. So we'll do draws and things like that at our volunteer parties, which we do a lot of. We do, yeah, a lot of things where our board and staff will organize a party for volunteers post-event or sometimes pre as well. But yeah, we've had Aurora Village donate an evening out there for, you know, a group and different things like that. So we do work really hard to incentivize people. We also ask a lot of people on site. So we're really, we have a lot of policy around like break schedules and how long someone can work before they need to go check in at VHQ and maybe grab a water. We always have free water pop and snacks and stuff like that floating around there. And we work really hard, in addition to incentivizing people, to make sure that whatever the task someone is doing is, it might be sort of monotonous, like a lot like what Cam was said, but we try and make sure that the surrounding environment is really fun. It's a music festival, and while we're working and volunteers are working, that doesn't mean that it needs to be a total schlep. So, you know, we try and make sure staff and board are going around and even just saying thank you, or, you know, relieving someone for a few minutes so they can go watch a bit of a set. I guess just really those little things where it's still fun, people get time to go appreciate a show, those sorts of things. Yeah, we build a lot of that into the structure of our planning to make sure that our volunteers know that they're appreciated. And yeah, and hoping that they'll come back next year, which seems to work really well. We do have a high retention rate annually, and we're always looking for ways to improve that too. So we spend a lot of time post-festival reading volunteer surveys that we send out. Most of our volunteers do respond, which is great. So we get a lot of feedback that way, and we try to implement those changes for the next coming year or the next small event. That stuff is really, really important to us in terms of listening to them and making sure that if they are coming back out to site, that they're getting the things that they ask for. We're making the changes that they've requested to make it a more comfortable and positive experience for them. Yeah, I love surveys. So we do a lot of those, and people don't seem to mind answering them for the most part. So that's really good news. When they become unhappy, I mean, I think it really just depends on the level of the situation. We've definitely asked people to leave the site before. Like I said, it's a lot of customer facing jobs or dealing with artists who are guests of ours for that weekend, where we really just can't afford to have someone who's, you know, not someone who's upset or being rude to other volunteers or, yeah, guests, customers, those sorts of things. So yeah, we've definitely asked people to leave. If it's a more small scale situation, I mean, it's usually just a matter of talking to them, asking what's up, and maybe moving them to a different area. I mean, we could always use more bodies in every part of the festival. So if that's not the area that they want to work in, it's usually pretty quick for us to swap them out or move them over. I feel like, especially with volunteers, it's often even just taking 5 minutes and listening to what's bothering them usually changes the situation. Sometimes it's a long day for them too, and they just need to vent, and they're doing it for free. So if they're, you know, upset, maybe they just want someone to listen to them for a few minutes. So yeah, we do spend a lot of time, I think, like I said, just checking in with people and making sure that we don't get to those types of situations before things explode. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Carly and Cam. I'll just add in a couple notes from Diane that she had sent in. So a couple of her notes were just about check in with your volunteers at points throughout the year. So not just before your event, but ongoing throughout the year. She said immediately after event, have a debrief and listen. So it's important to get that feedback from people doing the work. They will have firsthand knowledge of what works and what doesn't. So very similar to Carly's survey. Diane also says be open to suggestions. Even if you can't use the idea at the time, it may come in handy later. And she said that she keeps notes from all of the events that she looks after so that she can keep track of who did what and what worked well. It's also a great way to jot down suggestions and feedback for the following year. So very similar to things that Carleen can do to keep improving events and activities and programming that you're doing. Amazing.
One of the things with our board, our Multisport board, it's usually at the AGM where we go through and we identify who's going to be the race director for whichever event. And in that meeting, I might say, well, it's important to me to do this particular event. I want to do the pedal paddle pound. And so there's no questions, nobody flinches at all and just says, okay, well, Cam's not going to be the race director. There's no pressure put on me to be the race director. I might help set up a little bit or clean up a little bit after, but the focus for me that day is I'm going to be a participant of the event. And nobody makes you feel guilty or anything like that. So it's having a board that's open. And I can see this maybe with Folk on the Rocks. Maybe you want to go see Captain Tractor and you want to see every set they do. And if there's a way to make that happen for your volunteer and they're going to work super duper hard elsewhere, then hey, that's great. That's a great investment in a volunteer.
Definitely, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. I'm going to take the time now to open up the floor. So anyone that has questions, either for Cam or Carly or both of them, you're welcome to unmute yourself now and ask your question. And if no one has questions, I'll just ask more. But
I have a question. Before I lived in Yellowknife, I lived in Inuvik for almost 6 years, and I was a member of the board and later the chair of the Great Northern Arts Festival. And we always made it, but really struggled to get volunteers. And I feel like it's an extra challenge in smaller communities. I mean, Inuvik's not that small, but certainly, in the outlying communities, I know it's not always easy to get volunteers. So I was wondering if you had any advice maybe for smaller communities on how they can get volunteers. I mean, you've already made tons of excellent points and I really appreciate it, but I'm just digging a little deeper here.
I think one of the best things to do is to look for people who have passion for the festival, passion for the event, who want to be a part of making it a success and getting one-on-one with them. And I can't tell you how many times I've scrolled through my Facebook and just looked and I'm like, I wonder who would want to be involved with doing the triathlon, organizing the triathlon with me. Who maybe who doesn't swim? So, because then they're not going to be a part of the triathlon, but they have a love for the sport. So I can just pinpointing, if you're really looking, if you're just it sounds like you were really close to having maybe not enough volunteers, well, just putting it over the edge. It's hard when you have very few volunteers, but if you're just trying to put it over the edge, getting those really quality volunteers, the best bet is your personal network. Or, I mean, if you have a lot of friends, it's helpful, which I think you do.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I haven't really done a lot of work in a community smaller than Yellowknife, but I was just thinking about one thing that we do that I didn't mention previously, which is we have usually a few hours a week, especially in about a month before the festival, where we're set up usually in Birchwood Cafe. Our volunteer manager is there and she has a little sign that just says do you like Folk on the Rocks? Come talk to me. And And lots of times people will sit down and chat, and that's a way that we do get some volunteers. It's a kind of welcoming, friendly, casual way to invite people to talk to you. I mean, sometimes she just ends up talking to people and nothing happens. But I don't know, maybe that's one thing that could be helpful, is just sort of, I think, being in a public space and sort of being available for people to talk to you personally.
That's a lovely idea. Thank you, Carly.
Yeah, no problem.
I heard you saying that before, Carly, that you'll have a stand outside the post office and you're advertising. And one of the things I find with the Multisport is people will say that they don't know about an event, they never heard about it because they're not on Facebook. And literally the only thing the biggest push we put on is Facebook or sending out emails. But our email list is 326 people. It's not really a lot of people, and most of those people are on Facebook. So, but we don't have a budget for advertising. The concept of getting out into the community and saying, hey, we're Folk on the Rocks, or we're Multisport, or whichever group you are, just saying, look, we're here. There's a community fest, the community in Yellowknife, I can't remember what it's called, but you can go there as your community group and say, hey, we have these events happening, and if you want to volunteer for them, let us know. Opportunities to just showcase the community showcase, that's what it is. Just to showcase yourself and your community and get people active with you. It's so much admin in organizing anything. The 1 hour running event, let's say 2 hour running event, there's so much admin in getting that thing going. And this is just part of it, making people aware of you, trying to get the media to check you out and put a story in the paper about you. That's the big challenges.
Thanks. So Erin kind of highlighted in the chat box the issue that she sees with her volunteers is that she lives in a small community that's about 20 minutes outside of Hay River. And so she'll have people from Hay River saying that they'll come and volunteer, and she'll keep in contact with them. But then when the day comes, they don't show. So do either of you experience this? And what tactics do you kind of use for addressing that, or trying to lessen how much that happens?
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons we require so many volunteers is that we have sort of, I think it's about 18% no-show rate. So we sort of pad for that when we're doing our volunteer schedules, which I realize is easier said than done because sometimes it's hard just getting anyone at all. But I mean, yeah, we have no-shows even at our small events where I just need 4 people to help at the door for a small show or something like that. So, I mean, it's something that happens, I guess. Maybe it's about afterwards contacting them and asking, why they couldn't make it, and if you can do something to make it easier for them to get there, if that's possible for your organization. I know we have free bus rides out from downtown to, well, actually all across the city for our volunteers. So if you get on the city bus that's going out to Folk on the Rocks all weekend with your volunteer shirt or your badge on, you get a free ride. So we do some things like that where we try to reduce no-shows through any sort of organization or assistance that we can give to people. But yeah, at the end of the day, we also know that that's just going to happen. People get busy, or they have to go to work, or family emergencies, blah blah blah. So we just also try to pad for it and be prepared for the fact that we'll probably see some no-shows.
And I have the same thing, much smaller scale again. But what I do is I have floaters, and oftentimes if I'm co-race directing with somebody, I'll just offer to be a floater if he has all the. It's usually with Dave, and he has all of the positions filled, and then I just say, well, if there's anybody you need, just consider me a floater and put me wherever you need. And one year, I was a floater, and then I had to go stand at the edge of the highway for the Frostbite 50 for hours. Which wasn't very fun, but you need that person to make it a success. So floaters are great. It's great to pad your ranks, but keep your dependable people. Make sure that there's dependable people who will not be a no-show. So the dependable people will be good for floating around too.
Perfect. Thanks, both of you. So Erin said, yes, they do drive for free out from Hay River, but she likes the idea of being able to contact them afterwards and kind of see maybe where things went astray. So great ideas. We have a couple minutes left in this hour. Does anybody else have questions for Carly or Cam? This is like always the awkward silence part. Is anyone going to unmute? Amazing. Well, thank you both so much, Carly and Cam, for your time organizing and preparing this, and then sharing your knowledge and expertise with everyone. It is really appreciated. You did give lots of great ideas on how we can all get volunteers and retain them, keep them happy, keep them coming back, and lots of tips and tools on how to organize things as well. So thank you so much for that. To everyone else, thank you for being with us today. Really appreciate it. Our next webinar coming up is actually our favorite from the conference, and that will be Bright Spots. So December 8th is the aim that we are moving Bright Spots virtually. Cam will actually be one of the Bright Spots, so he'll be speaking about the fun walk/run, so giving some more details about those programs and how you could host that in your own community. And then we have a couple other exciting ones that I'm just securing, but I don't want to say because I don't want to jinx it. So you got to hang tight on that. But no, December 8th that we probably have that coming up. Otherwise, thank you all so much for being here today. If you have questions or you want to connect with Carly and Cam, let me know, and I can connect you with them if there's more specifics that you're looking for. Otherwise, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. So thank you.
Yeah.
And Carly and Cam, you're getting lots of thank yous in the chat box from people.
Thanks, everyone.